Hello and welcome to today's Up to Thrive Manage Your Mind Mindful Moment.
Welcome to Up to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
I was speaking to someone recently who had found herself in this midlife period, unhappy and resentful, and she was feeling a bit lost. I think that this is a pretty common scenario. We get here, many of us ask ourselves, is this all there is? Is this how I thought my life would evolve? Now, this particular person was raised in a home where everyone pulled their own weight, everyone had a job, weekends were for working on the property. She grew up, left home, got married, had children, and ended up making a home on another farm where they grew fruit as well. During the day, she worked a full-time job, and then she'd come home at night and she'd help out on the property as well, while also doing all the shopping, the laundry, the cooking, and the caring for the children. I still see this same scenario pretty commonly living in a rural setting. And also common was that her husband was raised not to show emotions and therefore affection. She spent many years working hard, doing all the things and hoping for some affection. And when she would from time to time get upset that she wasn't getting this affection that she would like to have, he'd just remind her that she knew that that just wasn't him. That's just not how he was. She did all the things, including bringing him his meals and cleaning up after him when he was done eating, which, by the way, makes me want to go to their house and throw his meal at him. And then still help him out on the farm as well. Whenever she'd get any time away to go and do something for herself, she'd always make sure that all the food that the family was going to need while she was away was prepared and in the refrigerator, ready for them to eat. His friends would often comment about how lucky he was to have someone who did all that she did for him. And he'd grunt and say he knew, but he never would actually say this to her. So here she was in midlife, going through all the hormonal changes and seeing the effects that time and aging and hard work and the harsh Australian sun had had on her skin and her body without as much as a thank you. She was feeling extremely unappreciated and resentful and taken for granted, and she was maybe a little bit more than just a bit pissed off. But this was her life, right? This is the life that she had built, the life that she had made. It's not the one she wanted, but what to do? I struggle a bit with this scenario, and I recognize that I have a lot of transference. Transference is when a person unconsciously redirects feelings or expectations from someone in their past, like a parent, teacher, or an ex, or a grandmother in my case, onto someone in the present. It's like your brain is saying, this feels familiar, and then wants to respond in the old way, even if it doesn't quite fit the current situation. See, the story in my head is, and please note the sarcasm here, oh, right, I'm supposed to do this job because I'm a girl, and because he's a boy, he doesn't have to. I know exactly where this story comes from. You see, I was partly raised by my grandparents. They had a very traditional relationship. He did not even know how to use the coffee maker. I don't think he washed even a single dish in his entire life. We, as kids, were his remote control for the TV, and we also knew exactly how he liked his coffee, and we would make it for him and take it to his lazy boy in front of the TV. His job was to do all the outside jobs, and her job was to do all the inside jobs. And then when she was done with those, she was also meant to help out with the cutting and loading and stacking of the wood for the winter and any other kind of outdoor jobs that maybe he needed a hand with. I can remember in particular being made to do the washing up after dinner, and I hated it. I still hate it. And my grandmother would tell me that that's just how life was. And I would tell her, well, that wasn't going to be my life, that I was going to have a maid. She would laugh and roll her eyes, and not in a, you're so cute kind of way. It was in a mocking, ridiculing way. my grandmother wasn't the kindest woman to me in particular. And looking back, I can see why she wasn't an overly happy woman. She would have been in her early 40s when my brother and I came along, and from early days, we were in and out of their home. By the time I was 7, they had full legal custody of us. So raising more children after the 3 hellions that she had already suffered through was probably not what she had envisioned for herself. My grandpa was very hard on the boys, but was a big softy when it came to the girls, so my aunt and I. But for me in particular, he thought that I was going to be something amazing, and he is a big reason I made it out of the cycle of poverty and addiction and abuse. So I imagine that she may have also been a little jealous of me and the life that I was born into, because things were changing for women. It was now common for women to go to university, to be independent, to think for themselves, to be career women. And that was something she would have never been able to consider for herself. So I can clearly see why hearing these types of stories often get me fired up, but I know that I can also relate. We often build our lives around what was modeled for us, and then we have to navigate relationships with our modeling, i.e. our baggage, and our partners bring theirs along too, just to make it a bit more fun. And then the busyness of life and building families and homes and careers, we find ourselves in patterns sometimes that we're not quite happy with. I firmly believe in the equitable division of labor, and I also believe that everything is a choice. And this is where we can either choose to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, or we can choose to keep the baby, no pun intended, and work on cleaning up the bathwater. Now, it could be really tricky, especially if they keep peeing in the water, or worse. But it may be doable. And full disclosure here, I am by no means a marriage counselor, and I offer referrals to any patient who comes to see me and is struggling and wants or needs a referral. I myself am still finding my own way. When I was working a lot more outside the home, I was doing rounds at the local hospital for my inpatients in the mornings before I ever even got to clinic. And then I would work all day at the clinic. I was doing on-call for emergencies and delivering babies. And I would do an occasional Saturday morning as well. I also had kids at home. I was doing the shopping, the laundry, the meal planning, and the cooking, and raising the kids. I suppose it made a lot more sense on paper to have a cleaner, and it took me a while to get around to getting one. I've mentioned this before, but once I did, it was like the best thing I ever did. It was awesome, and I am in absolutely no hurry to let her go. So even though we no longer have kids at home, I still employ her, and she's one of my very favorite people on the whole earth. For the joy she gives me when I get to come home to a sparkling, clean, lemon-fresh house, even if it is only for a short time. I love her for the time she frees up for me, and probably, maybe mostly, for the disdain and resentment she prevents in my relationship. Yes, there are only 2 of us who live here, but one of us does not value a clean and tidy home in the same way that the other one does. I'm not mentioning any names. All right. Well, there has to be some kind of a compromise, right? I'm not going to live in a home that isn't reasonably clean and tidy, and he's not going to clean anything without me constantly nagging him. I'm not interested in nagging anyone, and I'm also not interested in cleaning up after anyone, especially now that I've raised my children. I appreciate in a very fortunate position of being able to pay someone else to do it. But I have to say, if that meant sacrificing other things to be able to do that, you better believe it would fall very high on my priority list. So that's been one of my creative solutions. And if I couldn't employ someone, then I would have to find some other solutions. I have found some other things that work as well. She only does really the very basics. So I have had to come up with some other creative solutions, which I'll just keep to myself, so that I can keep my marriage intact. Don't want to give away too much. Over time, though, there are things that I have just learned to live with, and that's part of the compromise of living with another human being, I suppose. I was recently chatting with a friend who, again, like many of us in this generation, geez, I really hope that we have taught our sons and our daughters differently, ladies. She still works full-time, and she carries the majority of the load when it comes to the home. A friend of hers had told her about these cards that you can buy. I'm not exactly sure where they come from. I did do a quick Google search, but I couldn't find them. But apparently there's these cards that have domestic chores on each one. And I think maybe there's, a time element, how long it takes to do that particular chore in general. And then the idea is to spread all the cards out, and then everyone makes a pile out of the duties that they're responsible for. And then you kind of just make sure that the division of labor is equitable. It helps you divvy up all the labor. Now, apparently my friend didn't use these cards, but she used the idea of the cards, and she asked her husband, if we put all of the chores on cards and we spread them all out, and it had a time element on there as well, and then we put them in piles, what would that look like for each of us? Apparently this was really helpful in getting him to see the inequity in the division of labor, and he's started picking up a few more domestic duties. Yay! See how that goes. I'm aware also of someone else who has a solution when it comes to doing the laundry. She has no issues doing the laundry, but her husband has this seemingly unbreakable habit of taking off his clothes and just dropping them wherever he's standing. And most often, apparently, that's right in front of his dresser in their bedroom. Now, there was a time when she would begrudgingly pick them up off the floor for him, but then she started to get a bit resentful. So she decided to just live with the clothes on the floor and ignore them. She's arranged their bedroom so she never has to climb over the piles of shoes and clothes, and for the most part, doesn't really even have to look at it. She happily does the laundry that makes it to the laundry basket, but she no longer collects the laundry from the floor. Now, initially, he would get quite perturbed when he started running out of jocks and socks, but now he knows he's got no one to blame but himself. He does, however, continue on with the same habit and just does his own laundry when things are getting a little desperate, I suppose. Now, this story reminds me of something that came up at swimming recently. There are a couple of guys who swim with us girls intermittently, and one of them is a bit younger than we are. He has a young family, and he's very funny, down to earth, really cool dude, and really just tells things like they are, right? He's great value, and we all really enjoy having him around. But I complimented him on his laundry basket recently. He was carrying his wetsuit and his gear in this basket, just like I was. And I was telling him how much I liked my basket because it has a curve in one side so you can fit it up over your hip. And when you have a heavy wetsuit in there, it makes it so much easier to lug it back to the car. He giggled a bit, and then he told us all that he has one of these hip hugger laundry baskets at home too, and it actually has a picture of a woman on the side carrying the basket on her hip. He said even he was a bit, how you going with that? And it got me curious though. I really wanted to see the picture that he was talking about, so I Googled hip hugger laundry basket, see if I could find it. And I pulled up, I am not kidding you, do it for yourself if you don't believe me. I'm sure that you probably believe me though. I mean, really, how far have we come? I pulled up pages and pages of images of smiling women all doing the laundry. No, not one Y chromosome in there. What in the actual... Surely we can do better than that. I hope you've enjoyed this Manage Your Mind mindful moment. And if you have, and you can think of someone else who might enjoy it, please pass it on. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast to make it more visible to those who might get something out of it too. Have a great week, everyone. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts with medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.